Hey, good morning. I wanted to explain a few things that I had begun to explain earlier. And in the previous public posts, I began to explain a few things, and here I wanted to take a moment to explain a little bit more about some things we may call variables about deity, divinity, and the things that we have in the heavenly planes that have to do with some of the symbols that we have here on the earth. Okay, now here I have an illustration, and I drew it in hexagonal formation of heavenly centers that we have archetypes and symbols for. Now, at each point I've drawn them like this. See, I drew them like a circle this way, and then a circle this way, and then a circle like at the equator this way. Okay, like you can imagine this being the North Pole, the South Pole, and the equator, right? Okay, but these are not Earths or planets, or things like that. They're, although they may correlate with them, there are some more things to learn about it. Here we have these, like I'm gonna, now I've drawn 24 here, and more than 24, and we can, I only had so much room on the page, but see here I drew this out, and another one here, and another one here. And over here I don't have room on the page to draw them. Okay, so now people who may go around to every soul in the neighborhood and in the heavenly planes, whether it's smaller or greater, but these things pertain to things that may be great, but there are variables that pertain to greatness. Population groups can be smaller or larger, and greater in number. But let's see, someone who goes around to every soul and in the heavenly planes, and then makes sure that every being is loved. An archetype that we have here is called Venus. We can write Venus here. Venus. Okay, and there's just not one Venus or Aphrodite. It's anybody who does this in the heavenly planes and goes around and makes sure that every soul is loved, is developing in Venus. So one can be a Venus, but one can also be a Vino or an Aphrodite. Men can do this as well. It's just natural to archetype it as a female, Venus, Aphrodite. And if you study past cultures, such as there's Freya, the goddess of beauty and love in Scandinavia, and then there's also Venus, the beauty and love in Italy, and then of course there's Aphrodite in Greece, and then Egyptians have a goddess of beauty and love also. Why is this? This is the reason why there's these common variables with these archetypes. See, here we could write, let's just say this is one here. He goes around and he makes sure, or she, people who develop in such a heavenly center or a heavenly way, go around and make sure that everyone has a name. See, no one is left unknown. People have a name, and they make sure that everyone has a name. We could write Apollo here. This is Apollo. And let's say over here, these people who develop in such a way go around and make sure that everyone can defend themselves. And this is Mars. Right, Mars here. Okay. So there are these heavenly centers that many people do. It's not just one god. It's an archetype of any being who wants to do this. Now, these heavenly centers are like this normally, but every now and then there becomes a variable where something begins to exceed something else, like You know, these people over here have a bunch of names, but over here, you know, there's a lack of name development. So something begins to exceed something, and these rings become like this. They're no longer, okay, I could have drawn that. Less tippy. So this is a circle here, kind of like a nuclear, you know, symbol, you know. They become like that. So let's say this here, there's a lack of name development over somewhere. This becomes like this instead of like this. See, this is, you could think of this like a Liahona. In Mormonism, there's Liahonas. See, and then this will become this way. And when it does, one of these rings begins to envelop a certain area. It no longer is like this. The ring expands and will envelop whatever area it does. Sometimes it'll envelop all the areas, sometimes just partly. Okay, now I wanted to explain that there are these things in the heavens, or in the universe, called primes. You know, like if you watched He-Man, you know, he lifts his sword and he says, "Why the power of Grayskull?" And you know, he becomes into prime. He becomes powerful. He's prime. Okay, that's a fictitious cartoon of something that does happen. We have prime variables in the heavens, and we can use powers. And there are these heavenly thrones that we could develop prime with, or use prime. We could stand on the throne, a step of a throne, or a set of great steps in the heavenly planes. And the stone will have, the rock that you stand on has a specific function. It could very well that it will come into prime as you stand on it, and you have the use of its powers, or the powers of that category. Okay, like I previously explained that there's the wave function. Now, imagine a vast universe with many things out there that shouldn't be that way. Someone could stand on such a rock and bring it into prime and then wipe out all of those things. So just like the waves of the sea or the ocean come upon the sands of the shore and wipe away all the footprints and sandcastles and make them vanish, that there's the wave function in the heavens that makes things vanish and go away. It eliminates it. There's also the wind function. You know, the wind comes along and may blow a leaf or, you know, dirt somewhere else. Someone can use the wind function in the heavens and then relocate something to another location. It isn't, you know, just like a gush of water doesn't make these things vanish with the wave function. There's no force of air that moves it. It's just a reflection in nature. These things are reflection in nature of things of a heavenly function. Right? Okay, so, but there's many functions on great steps and on the steps of heavenly thrones that I'd like to explain more about. But one thing that I wanted to comment on is that there was, long ago, there were some crimes committed preventing opportunity meeting, and resulted with patterns of corruption, which meant that people could misuse primes and powers. And that's why we have such great cases of what have been tyranny and misery and things like that, things that shouldn't happen. People are misusing powers, and even diseases. Diseases are a result of people misusing opportunity to use powers to make diseases and things that they shouldn't. Okay, so long ago, these patterns of corruptions have been happening for a great while now. But there's kind of a bell curve to each, and then there's a long time between another great case of great corruption where many bad things happen. We're here. We have we are at the tail end of the Great Case. See, there was an escalation of corruption in the heavens, and then many people were taken into captivity. And the things on the earth reflected. The stage of Egypt long ago was when everything was brought to a stalemate. All the people who were in captivity and slaves got to the point where they made the corrupt people who were misusing powers slaves every bit as much as they were. It was a stalemating thing. So Egypt was an earlier stage. There were stages before this where we couldn't do that yet. And there are stages after this, such as what nations in Europe pertain to. And then later there was America. So I want the audiences to consider that there's monotheism, there's archetypes of things. And monotheism is the same thing, it's an archetypical thing. The truth is there is no one God. There's no such thing. Now, just like there's not one Venus, there's not one, whatever. However, monotheism does pertain to one. That's why it's mono. It's not poly. It's mono. That's because prime numbers reflect prime laws. And when things come into prime, sometimes the number 1 has a different property. So there's 1 times 1 equals 1 right now. However, if 1 comes into prime, 1 times 1 will equal 2. So physiology changes. There are changes in physiology that I want to explain. They're quite fascinating. There's a reason why we have fables about lasers and spaceships and warp speed, and each of these things have mathematical variables that pertain to them, and changes in physiology. Things become physiologically possible, or not possible anymore. So it would be that once we were able to have lasers and warp speed, and then we entered a later process and that was eliminated. We couldn't do that anymore. So I'm going to explain this in another video, but monotheism has one thing about it. There's a location on the earth where all monotheism comes from. That's the Middle East. Judeo-Christianity and Muslim. They're the only monotheistic religions, and all the others are not. Even Buddhism has more than one God. It's a one Buddha, but there's more than one God. And why is it that location has a monotheistic thing? All the religions that are monotheistic come from this area. Now later, there was another later stage where Mormonism began to happen within Christianity, and they were all theistic, and guess what? They wear togas in their temples, and that's because we're getting at a later stage where we're recovering more and more from this great corruption. So we're much more freer now than we were in Egypt, but we're not altogether free yet. But this emerging of Mormonism reflects that we're becoming more and more aware that we're divine. So you out there can be a god or a goddess. So can I. See, and during the corruption, they put a head cap on us to prevent us from thinking about, hey, why do I go to church and just believe in one God? They did this to us several times throughout the Great Case of corruption.